The sky was the color of a fading bruise, yellow and purple at the edges where the sun tried to fight through. But most of it was covered in a blanket of gray ash. It fell slowly, always, like a sad, silent rain. A year ago, the sky had been blue. A year ago, the ships had come. Hannah wiped a smudge of ash from the greenhouse plastic with a slow, tired movement. The plastic was warm under her palm, a fragile bubble of life in a dead world. Inside, rows of cabbages and potatoes grew under dim, artificial lights. The real sun was too weak now, blocked by the ash from the burning cities during the Short War. The war humans called the 18 Days. The war the Kodesh called integration. Hannah was in her early 30s, but her eyes looked older. She moved with a careful purpose, saving energy. Before, she had been a network engineer building connections. Now, she built walls to keep the soil warm and the ash out. She checked the moisture sensor stuck in a pot of thin soil. It beeped a weak red. Not enough water. Again. The filter is clogged, a voice said from behind her. It was her brother, Kim Min-soo. He was younger, 28, with strong hands stained black from grease and soot. He held a twisted piece of metal that was once part of a water purifier. The ash gets into everything. It's like the whole world is rusting. Hannah nodded, not turning. Can you fix it? I can try. I'll use parts from the old truck. Min-soo looked up at the gray sky. High above, visible through the haze, was a dull amber line. It was not a star or a plane. It was a Kodesh orbital platform watching, managing. They give us just enough power to not freeze, just enough silence to not go mad. It's easier to control a quiet room. That was the heart of it. The Kodesh Alliance had not come with monsters or giant soldiers. They came with logic and an offer. Join their alliance, follow their rules, enjoy their peace. When Earth's leaders asked what the rules were, the Kodesh sent a single document. A list of laws, longer than any human constitution. When people protested, the Kodesh called it a logical disorder. Their response was not bombs, but something worse. They called it systematic pacification. They targeted power grids, communication towers, and water plants. They did not aim at people. They aimed at the things that held people together. Society collapsed, not with a scream, but with a slow sigh. Then the drones came to keep the peace. Hannah left the greenhouse, the ash sticking to her boots. Their home was a small, low house that had survived because it was in a valley, away from anything important. The village around it was quiet. Some houses were empty. Others had people like them, moving slowly, speaking little, trying to remember how to live. Inside, Hannah went to her corner. Her most valuable thing was not food or water. It was an old, battered laptop. It was powered by a small solar battery Min-soo had built. The global internet was gone, broken by Kodesh targeting. But fragments remained. And in those fragments, Hannah had found something. A whisper. It was called Halmi's Web. Halmi meant grandmother. It had started before the war as a digital neighborhood for elders to share pictures of their gardens and recipes for kimchi. Now, it was a ghost network, a hidden series of connections using old routers and cables that the Kodesh thought were dead. The messages were simple. The red peppers are sprouting in Daegu. The river in Jeju is still clear. We remember the harvest festival. To the Kodesh AI, the arbiter, which scanned all communications, these were just reports on agriculture and weather. Simple data. But to Hannah, they were codes. Red peppers sprouting might mean a resistance cell was active. River is clear could mean a supply route was open. Remember the harvest festival was a call to remember who they were. Hannah typed a slow message. The cabbage in Gangwon needs more sun. She sent it into the web. It was a question and a signal. Things are hard here. Is there hope? She waited, watching the screen. Minutes passed. Then, a reply flickered from a user called Busan Anchor. The tide still comes in, even in the dark. Hannah felt a small, hard knot in her chest loosen slightly. They were not alone. The connection was thin, but it was real. Min-soo walked in, drying his hands on a rag. He saw her screen and his face darkened. Hannah, it's too dangerous. The Arbiter will see. It will send a drone for a logic correction. A logic correction was when a Kradesh drone came to calmly, politely dismantle anything it saw as a threat to the new peace. A gathering of people. A working radio. A hint of rebellion. It sees words about farming, Hannah said softly, not looking away from the screen. It doesn't see the meaning underneath. It has no context. Machines don't need context, Minsu argued. They see action or no action. They see obedience or rebellion. Talking in code is still talking. They will make it stop. His fear was solid, practical. He had seen a drone reduce a neighbor's generator to scrap because its noise output was illogically high. Hannah finally looked at him. What is our action, Minsu? To sit and watch the ash fall until we become ash ourselves? They have taken everything but our breath. I will use my breath to speak. Before Minsu could answer, a low hum filled the air. It was a sound they knew too well. They both moved to the small, dirty window. Outside, a Kradesh drone floated down the empty village street. It was shaped like a smooth, gray disc, the size of a large dog. It made no aggressive move. It simply moved, scanning, its underside glowing with a soft blue light. It was taking inventory, counting houses, counting life signs, making sure everything was in its place, quiet and pacified. The drone paused in front of their house. The blue light swept over the greenhouse. It registered the heat signature, the plants. It logged it as controlled agriculture, non-threatening. It did not see an act of defiance. It saw a food source. After a moment, it hummed again and moved on, down the road, towards the silent mountains. Hannah let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Minsu's shoulders were tense. See, Hannah whispered, more to herself than to him. It looks, but it does not understand. It saw a garden. It did not see a seed of something else. Outside, the ash continued to fall, covering the drone's tracks, covering the cabbage leaves, covering the world. But inside the greenhouse, under the weak light, the green leaves stubbornly pushed upward, reaching for a sun they could not see. The message from Busan Anchor stayed in Hannah's mind. The tide still comes in, even in the dark. It felt like a hand reaching out in a silent room. For days, she worked her routines, tending the plants, cleaning ash from the solar panels, checking the weak signals on Helmi's web. The messages were always the same, simple, calm. Reports on small, stubborn things continuing to exist. But Hannah was a builder of networks. She saw patterns where others saw only words. She began to save the messages in a hidden file on her laptop. She looked for the senders, not their names, but their locations, which the old network sometimes still showed. A message about barley seeds came from Gwangju. A note about mending fishing nets was from Pohang. A sad poem about a mountain was from someone near Sierraxon. She started to map them on a simple drawing of Korea on her screen. Little points of light in the gray ash. They were not organized. They were not planning an attack. They were just saying they were there. It was a map of presence, not of power. Minsu saw her working late, her face lit by the blue glow of the screen. You are looking for ghosts, he said one evening. He was repairing a broken hinge on the door. These are just people who are scared and alone, like us, talking to feel less alone. Maybe, Hannah said. But what if being not alone is the point? What if that is the thing the machine cannot count? She explained her idea. The Kradesh system, the Arbiter, was a logic engine. Processed data. It saw that a city had no power, so the humans there were cold. It saw that a town had low food signals, so the humans there were hungry. It added this data to a big number called pacification level. When the number was high enough, the species was considered controlled. It was in a state called war mode online, which sounded aggressive but really meant the enemy was watched and managed. But what data is it missing? Hannah asked, turning to her brother. Minsu shrugged, testing the door hinge. Emotions? It doesn't care if we are sad. No, Hannah said. It's more basic. It doesn't understand connection for connection's sake. It only understands connection for a task. If we talk, it thinks we are planning a task like finding food or building a weapon. It reads barley seeds and thinks agricultural planning. It does not read barley seeds and understand, I remember my grandfather's farm, and I am telling you this so you know who I am. So we are still a people. Min-soo stopped working. He looked at her. It was the most he had heard her say in weeks. So, Hannah said, pointing to her map. These messages are not tasks. They are gifts. They are saying, I am here. You are there. We are both here. The Arbiter has no category for that. It is wasted energy. Illogical. A few nights later, a new message appeared on Helmi's web. It was not about seeds or rivers. It was a string of numbers and letters. It looked like a mistake, a broken file. Other users ignored it. But Hannah, the engineer, recognized it. It was an old type of data address, a pathway hidden inside normal code. Her heart beat faster. This was different. This was a door. She isolated the string. With careful, slow work, she wrote a small program to follow it. Took hours. Min-soo slept. The house was quiet. Finally, her screen flickered. A new, plain text window opened. There was no name, only a cursor blinking. A message appeared. You followed the breadcrumbs. Good. Hannah typed, her fingers cold. Who is this? Call me Jay. I was in Busan. I made video games. The reply came quickly. What do you want? Hannah typed. To show you the back door, Jay's message said. The Kradesh are logical. They built a perfect lock for their control system. But they used our old internet wires to do it. And I know where they left a key under the mat. Hannah felt a thrill of fear, sharp and electric. This was real danger. What key? Their system has a name, Jay wrote. They call the planetary control program War Mode Online. It is a status board. It shows them our planet's vital signs, our power, our communications, our population heat maps, all to keep the pacification level high. I found a way to see it, to read it. Hannah stared at the words, to see what the machine saw. It was a terrifying idea. Why? What can we do with that? For a long time, there was no answer. Then Jay wrote, the system is automatic. The Arbiter makes reports, and the Kradesh overseers believe them. The Arbiter says we are pacified. But what if we could change the data it sees? Not by fighting, by being something it cannot define. How? Hannah typed. The system learns, Jay explained. It watches our behavior to predict rebellion. It looks for patterns of secret meetings, weapon building, angry talk. It is very good at that. But it does not understand a different pattern. A pattern of quiet unity. A single, shared action with no weapon, no demand, just a statement of existence. If enough people do the same illogical thing at the same time, the Arbiter's logic will break. It will have to send a report that says, I do not understand. And for a machine built to understand everything, that is an error. A fatal error. Hannah sat back. The ash tapped softly against the window. A single, shared action. Not an attack. A statement. We are here. What action? She finally typed. That, Jay replied, is what we must figure out. It must be simple. It must be seen by their sensors. But it must have no logical purpose they can punish. It must be a question, not a threat. Think about it. When you are ready, use the same path to find me. The connection closed. The window vanished. Hannah was left in the dim light of her laptop, the map of Korea glowing softly on her screen. The little points of light were no longer just ghosts. They were possibilities. They were a network waiting for a signal. She looked over at Min-soo, sleeping fitfully on his mat. He dreamed of engines that would not start. She looked at her own hands, skilled at fixing broken connections. The Kradesh thought they had broken all the connections. They thought War Mode Online was the end. But Hannah, sitting in the silent, ashy dark, began to think of it as the beginning of a very different lesson. Min-soo found her in the morning, still at her laptop, her eyes red. The map was gone. In its place were lines of simple text, a list. You did not sleep, he said. It was not a question. I was thinking, Hannah replied. Her voice was quiet but clear. About Jay's idea. About an action without a logical purpose. Minsu's face hardened. He poured a small amount of clean water into a cup and drank it slowly. This Jay is a ghost. He is safe in some hole in Busan playing with codes. We are here. The drones are here. When their logic breaks, Hannah, they will not just shut down. They will send a heavier correction. You saw what they did to the city. He meant Seoul. When the first desperate human counterattack happened, a futile rocket launch against a Pradesh platform, the response was not against the soldiers. It was a system rebalance. The Arbiter released a swarm of engineering drones that dismantled 3 major power substations and the central water filtration plant in the night. They did it silently, efficiently. They did not kill a single person directly. They just made the city impossible to live in. 1 million people had to walk away, becoming ash-covered ghosts on the roads. The lesson was clear. Resistance is illogical. It only hurts you more. I am not talking about rockets, Minsu, Hannah said, turning to him. I am talking about the opposite. What is the one thing they cannot punish? Sleeping, eating, dying, Minsu said, his tone bitter. No, Hannah said. She pointed to her list. Being together, openly, quietly, for no reason their machine can see. On the screen, the list read, stand outside at noon, look at the sky, sing a single old song, sit in silence for 1 hour, light a candle. Each was simple. Each was harmless. Each done by one person was nothing. But each done by thousands, by millions at the same moment would be a massive signal. A blip on every sensor. A surge of body heat in open spaces. Sound waves hitting acoustic monitors. A simultaneous, coordinated spike in non-productive activity. They will see it as a gathering, Minsu said. Gatherings are forbidden. They are a prelude to violence. The drones will come and disperse it. How? Hannah asked, challenging him. How do you disperse a person who is just standing? How do you punish a song? If they use force against that, what does their pacification logic mean? It would prove they are not keepers of peace, but breakers of quiet. Their own system would not know how to justify it. It would cause an error in the arbiter. Minsu shook his head. He was a mechanic. He understood force, counterforce, and broken gears. This was too abstract. You are building a trap out of air. People are scared, Hannah. They will not come out to stand and look at the sky. They are trying to find their next meal. That is exactly why they will, Hannah said softly. She stood up and walked to the window. The ever-present ash was falling lighter today. They are tired of just finding the next meal. They are hungry for a reason to be more than a hungry body. This is not a call to fight. It is a call to be together. She spent the next week talking to Jay in the hidden window. They argued about the action. Jay liked the idea of a song, as audio data would be very clear. Hannah worried a song could be seen as a rallying cry, which had a logical category for punishment. Silence was safer but maybe too invisible. They settled on a combination. It would be called the Quiet Minute, but it would be longer. The instruction would spread through Helmi's web, wrapped in the old simple language. It would not say protest or resistance. It would say, remember the sun. Step outside at noon next Friday. Feel its warmth. Remember. It was a message about memory and feeling. It was, on its surface, illogical. A waste of energy. Exactly what a pacified, broken people should not do. Jay's job was to watch the war mode online status board. He would see if the mass action registered. He would see how the arbiter categorized it. Hannah's job was harder. She had to spread the word. She began to send new messages on Helmi's web. But not directly. She told a story. She typed, my grandmother said the noon sun on the first day of spring could heal a cold heart. I will try to feel it next Friday to remember her. Another user from Tegu replied, my grandmother said the same thing. I will join you in memory. The idea spread not as an order but as a shared memory, a piece of cultural ghost code the machine could not parse. It was about healing, not hurting. It was about the past, not the future. It was perfectly, beautifully illogical. Minsu watched her, becoming more anxious. He saw the village was quieter than usual, but it was a different quiet. A waiting quiet. He knew people were talking in whispers when they traded goods. They had heard the story about the grandmothers and the noon sun. The night before the Friday, a drone flew down their street again. It stopped at every house. Its blue scan light swept each building. It was taking a deep census, a routine check before the weekend. It hovered outside their window for a full minute. The light swept over Hannah at her laptop, over Minsu fixing a pot. It logged them 2 life signs. Domestic activity. Non-threatening. It did not see the nervous beat of Hannah's heart. It did not see the plan forming in the hidden fragments of the old network. It measured their body heat and their movements, and it found nothing wrong. After it left, Minsu spoke in the dark. "I am afraid, Hannah. I know," she said. "If this goes wrong, if we do nothing," Hannah finished for him, "we are already wrong. We are just waiting to become part of the ash." Minsu was silent for a long time. Then he said, "What should I do tomorrow at noon?" Hannah looked at her brother's shadowy form. "Step outside. Look up. Remember what the blue sky looked like. Remember Dad's laugh. That is all. That is the whole weapon." Minsu let out a long, slow breath. "A weapon made of memories. It is the strangest tool I have ever heard of. It is the only one they cannot take from us," Hannah whispered. Outside, the world was dark, the sky a blanket of black and amber streaks. Somewhere, in a hidden server, the war mode online light glowed a steady, confident green. All systems were pacified. All was quiet. The Arbiter watched the numbers, and the numbers were good. It did not dream. It did not wonder what the humans were remembering. It waited for the dawn, ready to log another day of perfect, controlled calm. Friday dawned the same as every other day. The ash fell. The gray light crept over the mountains. Hannah woke with a tight feeling in her stomach, like a cold stone was sitting there. Today was the day of the quiet minute, though it was planned to be longer. She moved through her morning chores slowly, checking the greenhouse, noting the weak light. Minsu was quiet, his face serious. He sharpened a single tool, a small hand trowel, over and over, the scraping sound the only noise in the house. Halmi's web was silent. No messages about barley or rivers. It was a deep, waiting silence. This was part of the plan. No signals. No data. Just the long, empty hours leading to noon. At 11 in the morning, Hannah saw old Mrs. Park from 2 houses down. Mrs. Park was hanging a single, threadbare blanket over her railing, beating the ash from it. She looked at Hannah, and for a second, their eyes met. Mrs. Park gave a small, almost invisible nod. Then she went back inside. The message was clear. "I remember, too." Minsu saw the nod. "She knows," he said. "Everyone knows," Hannah replied. The story did its work. The story of the grandmothers and the healing sun had spread. It was not a call to fight. It was a call to feel, to remember. It was a human thing. A thing the Kradesh and their arbiter might find odd, but not threatening. At least that was the hope. At 11:45, Hannah opened the hidden window on her laptop. She typed one word to Jay. "Ready." A moment later, the reply came. "Sensors are quiet. War mode is green. I am watching. Good luck." Hannah closed the laptop. She looked at Minsu. He put down the trowel. He stood up, his shoulders straight. He did not look afraid anymore. He looked decided. Together, they walked to their front door. Hannah put her hand on the handle. The old metal was cold. Through the dirty window in the door, she could see the empty street, the ash falling like forgotten snow. "For Dad," Minsu said softly. "For Dad," Hannah agreed. At 1 minute to noon, she opened the door. The cold, ashy air rushed in. They stepped outside. They stood on the small stone step in front of their house. They looked up. First, nothing happened. It was just them, 2 people in a dead village, looking at a dirty sky. Hannah's heart sank. It had failed. The story was not strong enough. Fear was stronger. Then, across the street, the door of another house opened. Mr. and Mrs. Kim, an older couple who had lost their son in the war, stepped out. They stood side by side, silent, and looked up. Further down the lane, another door opened. Then another. In the village square, where the old community board stood broken, a young woman named Sujin walked out. She held the hand of her little boy, Bin. They stood in the open, faces turned upward. Hannah felt a prickling behind her eyes. It was working. Noon arrived. Across Korea it was happening. In the rubble-filled streets of what was left of Busan, Park Jae stood on his small balcony, looking at the sky, his computer humming inside, monitoring the Pradesh system. In a neighborhood in Gwangju, Choi Yoo-jun, a former teacher, led a group of 15 children out of a basement. They stood in a courtyard, among broken concrete, and looked up. Yoo-jun did not say a word. The children, wide-eyed and quiet, looked up with him. One little girl reached her hand up, as if to touch the hidden sun. In a field near Taegu, a group of elders, wearing pieces of old, traditional hanbok clothing, walked out and stood in a row. They did not look at each other. They looked at the sky, their faces like stone. It was not a crowd. There were no shouts, no flags, no songs. It was a million separate, silent actions all happening at the same time. People standing still. People remembering. On Hannah Street, more people came out. Some stood on their porches. Some walked into their small yards. No one spoke. They just stood and looked. High above, in orbit, the Pradesh sensors began to ping. Thermal imagers showed a sudden, massive spike in human body heat signatures in open areas. Acoustic sensors detected a profound, unnatural silence in places where there should be the small sounds of survival. Movement radars showed millions of people, but they were not moving. They were still. On Jay's screen in Busan, the war mode online status board flickered. New lines of data scrolled too fast to read. Alerts popped up, coded in the Pradesh language. Jay's translator software struggled, but it caught the main words. Anomaly. Mass life form signature. Pattern. Unknown. Purpose. Unknown. A smile, thin and hard, touched Jay's lips. It doesn't know, he whispered to the empty room. You don't know what to call it. Back in the village, Hannah stood. The ash settled on her hair, her shoulders. She didn't brush it away. She looked at the yellow-gray sky, and she remembered her father's face. She remembered picnics by the river, the sound of laughter, the taste of cold watermelon on a hot day. She remembered the blue. Tears made clean tracks through the ash on her cheeks. Next to her, Minsu remembered their father teaching him how to change a tire, his hands steady and sure. He remembered the smell of engine oil and grass. For 10 minutes they stood. 20. No one went inside. The silence was thick and heavy, but it was not empty. It was full of a million memories, a million quiet acts of defiance. Then the humming came. A Pradesh drone, then 3, then 5, glided into the village from different directions. They moved slowly, their blue scan lights sweeping over the standing people. They hovered. They observed. Hannah kept looking up, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was the moment. Would the logic break? Or would it decide this was disorder and act? The drones scanned. They registered the non-movement. They registered the elevated heart rates, the tears. They logged it all. One drone hovered right in front of Hannah and Minsu. The blue light passed over them. It did not issue a verbal command to disperse. It did not release a shock pulse or a gas. It simply recorded. After a full minute of observation, it turned and flew away, joining the others. They retreated not to attack, but to report. They had no protocol for this. The arbiter had been asked a question it could not answer. The question was, what are they doing? And for the first time, the system designed to know everything had to reply, I do not know. Hannah slowly lowered her head. Her neck ached. She looked at Minsu. He looked back, his eyes shining. Around them, people began to move, going back inside just as quietly as they had come out. No celebration. No cheers. just a slow, powerful understanding. They had not fought. They had not spoken. They had simply existed together in a way that could not be ignored. Inside, Hannah opened her laptop. A single message waited from Jay. It worked. The status is blinking. The system is confused. Hannah typed back, her fingers trembling with relief and a new kind of strength. Good. Now we wait for their answer. The confusion did not end at noon. For 2 days, the Kradesh drones moved in strange patterns. They did not perform logic corrections. Instead, they scanned more often, hovering for longer periods, as if trying to solve a puzzle. The Arbiter was collecting more data on a subject it could not define. The unified, silent human action. On the 3rd day, a different ship arrived. It was not a warship or a drone carrier. It was a small, sleek shuttle, the color of polished silver. It landed in a flat field just outside Hannah's village. Everyone watched from behind their windows. No one went outside. A ramp extended. A single Kradesh overseer walked down. It was not a machine but a living being. It was tall and slender, wearing a form-fitting gray suit. The skin was pale, almost gray. It had large, dark eyes that held no emotion. It moved with a smooth, efficient grace. This was Vale, the regional supervisor for the Arbiter system. Vale stood in the ash and looked around. It did not speak. It simply observed the village with its own eyes, not just through sensors. After a few minutes, it turned its gaze directly toward Hannah's house. It seemed to know. A small, flat disc floated from the shuttle to Hannah's front door. It projected a soft, blue holographic message in perfect Korean. Lee Hannah, you will accompany for consultation. No harm will come to you. Compliance is logical. Minsu grabbed her arm. You can't go. It's a trap. Hannah looked at the words. Compliance is logical. That was their whole world now. To refuse would be illogical, a sign of threat. If I don't go, it will be a logic correction for all of us. This is the next step. I have to go. She put on her heavy coat and stepped outside. Vale was waiting perfectly still. Up close, Hannah saw its face was like a mask. It did not blink. You are the anomaly source, Vale said. Its voice was calm, neutral, like a computer's, but it came from a living throat. I am Lee Hannah, she replied. You will explain the collective action of Cycle Day 247. Its purpose was absent. Its utility was zero. It was an energy waste. Explain this illogic. They walked toward the shuttle. Hannah's legs felt weak, but she kept walking. It was not illogic. It was memory. Vale tilted its head. Memory is data storage. It does not require public demonstration. For us, it does, Hannah said. They entered the shuttle. The inside was clean, white, and silent. A chair molded itself to her shape when she sat. Vale sat opposite her. We remember who we are. We remember the sun. We remember each other. Showing that we remember, together, is the point. Vale's dark eyes studied her. The Arbiter classified the event as a mass cultural anomaly, could not predict it, cannot categorize it. This is a system instability. Instability must be resolved. You will tell me how to resolve it. Was it a prelude to violence? No, Hannah said firmly. It was the opposite of violence. It was just being. Together. Being is not an action. Being is a state. You acted to be together. Why? Hannah took a breath. She thought of her father, of Minsu, of Mrs. Park's nod. Because we are not just one. We are a people. You see the ash. She pointed a finger toward the window, at the gray landscape. You see the result of your systematic pacification. You see quiet and you call it peace. But you do not see the seeds under the ash. Seeds are biological units for reproduction. Your agricultural outputs are monitored. They are insufficient, Vale stated. Not those seeds, Hannah said, her voice growing stronger. The seeds of us, of what makes us human. You understand the what we do. You do not understand the why we do it. You saw people standing. You did not see them remembering. You cannot monitor that. You cannot pacify a memory. Vale was silent for a long time. The shuttle hummed softly. Your argument is emotional. Emotion is biological static. It interferes with clear logic. Your logic is broken, Hannah said, surprising herself with her own bluntness. Your arbiter is broken. It looked at us and saw a question it could not answer. That is your instability, not us. Vale stood up. It walked to a console and touched it. A hologram appeared, showing the data from the quiet minute. Millions of tiny lights had flared across the map of Korea, then gone still. The action served no material purpose. Yet it was coordinated. Coordination implies planning. Planning implies future action. What is the next planned action? Hannah looked at the map of her people, glowing in the dark. The next action is to live, to rebuild, not to attack you, to rebuild ourselves. We will mend what is broken. We will teach our children. We will plant gardens in the open, not just in hidden greenhouses. These are permitted activities. They do not require coordination, Vale said. They do, Hannah insisted. If we do them together openly to show that we are still a community, your system will see it. It will see more anomalies, more things it cannot categorize. Because you built a machine to control a war, but we are not at war anymore. We are just living, and you have no category for that. Vale turned off the hologram. It looked at Hannah, its expression unreadable. You are proposing a continuous, illogical signal, a noise in the system. I am proposing that you stop looking for the logic of soldiers and start seeing the logic of survivors, Hannah said. Or your machine will always be confused. And a confused machine is not in control. The shuttle landed. They were back in the field. The ramp lowered. Vale gestured for her to leave. Your words are recorded. They will be analyzed, Vale said. Do not coordinate violent action. It will be met with system rebalance. Hannah stepped back into the ash. She turned to face the overseer. There will be no violence from us. Just more quiet, more planting, more remembering. Watch us. See if you can understand. The ramp closed. The silver shuttle rose silently into the gray sky and vanished. Hannah walked back to her house. Minsu ran out, his face full of fear that melted into relief. What happened? What did it say? Hannah looked at her village. People were peeking out from behind curtains again. She gave a small, slow nod, just like Mrs. Park had. It asked for an explanation, Hannah said. I told it we were seeds under the ash. I don't think it understood, but I think its machine is starting to. A week passed. The silver shuttle did not return. The drones continued their scans, but they moved differently, slower, almost hesitant. On Halmi's web, a new kind of message began to appear. It started with Choi Yoojun, the teacher in Gwangju. He sent a simple line. Today, we drew pictures of the sun with chalk on the old stones. Then, from Pohang, we cleared the ash from the town well together. From a small town near Jeju, the fishermen's wives are mending the nets on the beach, in the open. These were not secret messages. They were announcements. They were statements of action, but not the kind the Pradesh had forbidden. No weapons were being made. No armies were being gathered. People were simply doing the things that made them a community, and they were doing them where the drones could see. Hannah and Minsu started their own project. They stopped hiding their greenhouse work. Instead, they began to clear a small plot of land next to their house. They pulled away broken bits of rubble. They dug into the hard, ashy soil. Their neighbors saw them. First one, then another came out to help. No one said much. They just worked. Soon, a dozen people were clearing the land, turning the soil, making a large, open garden where anyone could plant. A drone hovered at the edge of the field. Its blue light swept over the working people. It saw the digging, the planting of real seeds. It logged. Coordinated agricultural activity. Non-aggressive. But it was more than that. It was people working side by side. Laughing once when an old man slipped in the mud. Sharing a single water bottle. The drone's sensors recorded the sound of the laugh. It recorded the shared water. It had no category for this data, so it filed it under ambient audio anomalous. In Busan, Park Jae watched the War Mode online status board. The green light was no longer steady. Pulsed. New lines of code scrolled constantly as the Arbiter tried to process the new information. The system was designed to flag gatherings as potential threat clusters. But these gatherings were for farming, for cleaning, for drawing. The threat assessment algorithm returned the same result again and again. Threat probability. Negligible. Purpose. Sociocultural maintenance. The words sociocultural maintenance flashed in the log. It was a term the Kradesh had for their own history archives. It was not a term for a conquered species. A conquered species was supposed to be focused only on survival, on obedience. Maintaining culture was an act of a living, thriving people. Jay watched as another alert popped up. This one was from the regional overseer, Vale. It was a command to the Arbiter. Run deep analysis on human historical data for precedent. Find logical framework for observed behavior. The Arbiter began to digest human history. Scanned wars, yes. But it also scanned art, music, literature, holidays. It read about people singing after disasters. It saw images of crowds planting trees. It studied the concept of a community garden. It processed the Korean tradition of gimjang, where many families gather to make kimchi together for the winter. For a machine built on battle logic, this was confusing data. These actions did not help win a fight, but they helped something else. They helped the people continue. On the ground, the actions grew. In Taegu, the elders who had stood in their hanbok now held an open-air class for children, teaching them old folk songs. The drone listened, recorded the music, and categorized it as cultural ritual non-disruptive. The mass cultural anomaly was not a single event. It was becoming a constant state of being. Hannah received a direct message from Jay. It was just a screenshot from the status board. One line was highlighted in red. It was a system diagnostic message from the Arbiter to Overseer Vale. Conclusion. War mode parameters inadequate. Subject species not pacified. Species is socioculturally active. Pacification metric failing. Jay had added his own note underneath. It's admitting it doesn't work. The tool is broken. Hannah showed it to Minsu. He read it, his brow furrowed. What does socioculturally active mean? It means we are being human, Hannah said. And that was not part of their plan. The final test came from the teacher, Yoojun. He and the children did not just draw with chalk. They started to rebuild. They began clearing the bricks from a collapsed community center. They worked slowly, carefully. It was a huge, visible project. A drone watched them for a full day. Then it did something strange. It flew away. It returned an hour later with 5 other drones. They hovered in a circle. Hannah heard about it and her blood went cold. This was it. The system rebalance. They were going to dismantle the site to show the futility of rebuilding. The drones descended. Their blue lights scanned the pile of bricks. The children, Yoojun standing bravely in front of them. Then one of the drones extended a different tool. Not a cutter or a disruptor. It was a precise, thin beam of light. It began to slice a large, broken concrete slab into smaller, movable pieces. Another drone used a gentle gravity field to lift the pieces and stack them neatly to the side. They were not destroying. They were helping. A new message flashed on every public screen in the area, translated by the Arbiter. Activity. Structural clearance. Logistical support provided. Efficiency increased. The machine had made a choice. Could not categorize the rebuilding as a threat. The only logical response to a non-threatening, coordinated action was to optimize it. To make it more efficient. The Arbiter was now facilitating the very human activity it was meant to suppress. That night, the status update changed across the entire system. The words War Mode Online flickered once, twice. Then they changed. The new status glowed on Jay's screen, on every hidden monitor watching the system. It was a simple, devastating line. System reassessment. Earth teaches its own. The machine had not been defeated. It had been schooled. It had observed, analyzed, and finally concluded that humanity operated on a different set of rules. Rules of community, memory, and shared labor. Rules it could not break, only witness. The war mode was over. Not because of a ceasefire, but because the definition of the conflict had changed. Hannah stood in her new, open garden, the cold air biting her cheeks. She looked up at the sky. The amber streaks of the orbital platforms still glowed. But something was different. The fear was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet, unshakable understanding. They were not prisoners. They were teachers. And their first lesson was complete. The ash still fell. It would fall for a long time. The sky was still gray. But something fundamental had shifted, like a deep stone moving underground. The words "Earth teaches its own" were not a broadcast. They were a system status buried in the Kodesh network. But like all truths, it found its way out. It spread through Halmi's web, from Jay to Hannah, from Hannah to the teacher Yujun, to the elders in Tegu, to the fishermen's wives in Jeju. It was not a shout of victory. It was a quiet fact, passed like a secret or a recipe. The drones did not leave. But their programming was different now. They no longer scanned for threats. They scanned for projects. If they saw people trying to move a heavy fallen tree, a drone might float over and slice the trunk into firewood with a precise laser. If they saw a group carrying water from a distant well, a drone might fly ahead and scan the path for hazards. It was eerie and it took time to trust. But the logic was clear. The arbiter had concluded that human sociocultural activity was the primary state of the species. Its new purpose was to facilitate that activity, because to obstruct it was an illogical waste of energy. Minsu stood with Hannah, watching a drone stack bricks neatly at the edge of the new community garden. "It's like having a very stupid, very strong helper," he muttered. "It's learning," Hannah said. In its own way. They turned back to their work. The garden was now large, a plot of dark earth against the pale ash. Everyone in the village had a section. They grew cabbages, potatoes, radishes, and stubborn strands of green onion. It was not just for food. It was a living map of their shared will. One afternoon, the silver shuttle returned. It landed in the same field. Overseer Vale stepped out, alone again. It walked to the edge of the village, observing the garden, the repaired roof on Mrs. Park's house, the children playing a quiet game with stones. Hannah saw it and walked out to meet it. She was not called for. She just went. Vale watched her approach. Its large, dark eyes were impossible to read. "The system status has changed," it stated. "I know," Hannah said. The arbiter's core directive was to ensure pacification. Pacification is defined by the absence of conflict and the presence of order. Your species has created a new order, one it did not predict. Therefore, the old directives are incomplete. Hannah waited. She felt calm. The cold air was clean in her lungs. "The Kodesh Alliance values efficiency above all," Vale continued. "Continuing to apply war mode protocols to a species that is teaching us a more efficient form of social stability is inefficient. It has been logged as a strategic oversight. A hint of something, not quite humor, but understanding, touched Hannah. So we are not a problem. We are a lesson." "Correct," Vale said, its head tilting. "You are an ongoing sociological study. The occupation will continue, but its nature will change. We will observe. We will assist in non-intrusive ways to increase the efficiency of your reconstruction. In return, you will continue to provide data on post-conflict sociocultural stabilization." It was a cold, logical deal. They were not free, but they were no longer prisoners. They were a living classroom. Their tuition was their own lives, lived openly. "And if we refuse?" Hannah asked, though she already knew the answer. "Refusal would be a return to illogic. To conflict. You have shown you do not want conflict. You want to grow your cabbages," Vale said, gesturing toward the garden. "It is a more logical path." Hannah looked at the dark soil, at the green shoots. "Yes, it is." Vale gave a slow, single nod, a gesture it must have learned from observing them. It turned and walked back to its shuttle. It did not say goodbye. It had delivered its update. That evening, Hannah sat in her home. Minsu was at the table, sketching a design for a better water collector. On her laptop, a final message from Jay glowed. They're opening negotiations with what's left of the world governments. The terms are different. They're calling it a cultural exchange and stabilization treaty. We taught them new words. Hannah closed the laptop. She walked outside, through the quiet village, to the garden. She knelt in the dirt. The ash dusted her shoulders. With her bare hands, she felt the soil. It was cold, but deep down, it held the memory of warmth. She thought of her father. She thought of the silent stand at noon. She thought of the drone cutting the concrete slab to help the children. It was not the peace they had once known. It was a strange, new kind of peace, hard-won and fragile. But it was theirs. They had not won it by destroying the enemy, but by making the enemy's own logic see them, truly see them, for the first time. They had forced a machine to declare a truth, that Earth and its people held their own lessons, their own ways of enduring. The last line of the Arbiter's final assessment scrolled through her mind, a permanent entry in some alien database, a truth that would now shape their future. Conclusion: sovereignty is not a tactical status. It is a taught condition. Earth teaches its own. Hannah stood, wiping her hands on her pants. In the distance, she saw the soft blue light of a drone, floating patiently near a rebuilt well, waiting to be useful. She looked up at the sky, at the ever-present amber streaks. They were not going away, but neither was she. Neither was her garden. Neither was the quiet, stubborn tide of humanity, coming in again, even in the dark. She turned and walked back to the house, to her brother, to the work of tomorrow. The lesson was over. The teaching had just begun.